Hello there. Hi, thank you very much for that introduction, Ian. And I'm very pleased to say that I was actually able to hear your initial words and also all the things that Andrea has said, and a very positive message from her there, as usual. So I just wanted to reflect upon a few elements that are going into the mix for this period ahead of us, with the particular focus that we've had for today on the future beyond the sort of incredibly difficult times that we're in. I don't want to sort of go over too much of just how grim it's been, because no one knows it better than the people on this webinar today. Certainly from a parliamentary point of view, the workload has been immense for me and my team. All of them have been working very, very hard on this. We've had over 500 cases this month, and that's even more than April, when we thought we were seeing more than we could ever possibly imagine seeing before or since. So it's been even more intense because of the additional lockdown and all that's come with it. And obviously that's not been strategic, that's been tactical, that's been people's individual issues to deal with. And so today, in a sense, is very welcome to give an opportunity, just very briefly, to step away from that tactical individual firefighting to talk a little bit more strategically. And one of the big strategic changes that's coming is of course, the move to unitary local government for Northamptonshire. West and Northamptonshire ourselves coming into the West, and that will merge functions that stand side by side anyway in a quite a logical way. Functions like public health, which is county, and environmental health, which is district stroke borough at the moment, and then others where there is a full overlap at the moment, like regeneration and culture and tourism. And culture I will come back to. Just to add to that, I think people may be aware, but just to get it on the record today, there's a town council for Northampton being created as well, to ensure that there's a full network of town and parish councils as that non-statutory layer. And I think what's important about that is just to underline that isn't simply reinventing the wheel. A town council, a parish council, is a non-statutory authority. It doesn't have statutory powers in the way that the borough did, in the way that the county did, and in the way that the unitary will. So how useful that will be for business, what relationship that will have with business, will remain to be seen. But I'm sure Jonathan will have some views on that, because he's been very much involved in seeing that be created in its shadow form. I touched upon culture because I do think a culture-led resilience and recovery is absolutely key to town recoveries, but to Northampton in particular. I've written about it in my NN Pulse magazine column, which I have every month, and I've got a long history with it myself, having been the chairman of a UNESCO World Heritage Site and vice chairman of a tourist board. That's why I was so keen to put a lot of weight behind bids for the theatre, for their bids into DCMS, but also to Delaprey Abbey as well. And that cultural element is going to be a major part of the £8 million plus Future High Street Fund, which Northampton has successfully been awarded. A lot of work from the people on this call, a lot of work from the Borough Council and others in putting their support behind that, which I was pleased to support. That will have a lot of cultural impact, particularly given that marketplace focus, market square focus that it has. We look forward to planning that out now that the funding has been allocated. And aligned to that, forthcoming changes to planning through the new planning bill. There's an 86-page document on that, a response to which I published with my APPG for SME house builders on it. In terms of Northampton Town Centre, the debate there the tension, which I don't think will actually be able to be fully resolved, but will nevertheless be something that we'll be living with for quite a while, is between a relaxation of permitted development rights, which will allow empty shops and other non-residential properties that have either become available or have fallen out of use to be converted into residential. And the tension there is between filling the gaps and tightening in the town centre in this new future that some of the points of which Ian elaborated upon in his opening comments, and the challenges for the planners in the new unitary, where their ability to more tightly shape the way certain streets are going to look won't be there anymore, because those permitted development rights aren't able to be enforced in the same way in future by the local authority. So that is absolutely one to watch. I mean, looking further ahead, I think that point about we've had 5 years in 9 months is probably true. 90%, I think, of what's happened in business terms is an accelerant of trends that were happening anyway, but there is 10%, maybe more, that isn't. Would people have been working from home, and will people remain working at home more now than perhaps ever before as a result of this, rather than a simple and slower move in that direction? Obviously, the changes over public health, is that going to lead to more sort of masks and less contact, and people being less happy about those sorts of gatherings on a something like permanent basis psychologically? Or will there be such a sigh of relief when we get to some sort of herd immunity through vaccination that actually the opposite will happen? And that's something obviously that adds risk and opportunity within people's business decisions. Another thing that's happened, which is already a very strong English trend, and not necessarily a very good one, is a trend towards centralisation that this has underlined, making moves towards devolution, genuine local decision making, a bit more difficult. I mean, you know, I spend a lot of time supporting bids where a local area, instead of having the financial autonomy to make decisions, is forever bidding to do something in its local area to decision makers who actually don't know anything about the local area in question. That highlights some of the issues within the Town Centre 2030 Select Committee report that I was involved in, which reflected that lack of local autonomy in England because of devolution. I'm saying England rather than Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, where it's different relative to places like Holland, Denmark, Germany, and others that do it differently. And I'm in the middle, well, no, I'm nearly at the end of a report for the All-Party Group on Devolution, which I also chair, which will reflect some of that. I mentioned those European countries because I wanted to conclude with reflections about the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, which is coming out in 2022 to replace things like ERDF, those big European structural funds, which were a big part of many people's lives for a long time. There's some huge challenges there. And again, an opportunity to decentralise that I hope will be seized, but the bidding into the centre culture is so prevalent in this country that will remain to be seen, and something I'll be speaking out about. In the meantime, there is £220 million in the spending review to tide over into that new Shared Prosperity Fund era, replacing all those European structural funds. But I'm still seeking clarity, as are we all, about what that 220 actually means, and obviously the bigger picture of what the overall Shared Prosperity Fund will mean for local government and local area. Because certainly, if we're simply crossing Brussels out and writing Whitehall into the concept of those sort of funds, that doesn't get us as further forward in terms of genuine local empowerment through things like the bid, through things like the new unitary authority that I'd like to see. So lots of change ahead, lots to deal with there, on top of everything people are dealing with in the business environment. There's no minimizing the massive challenges that lie ahead. but I am grateful for the partners on this webinar for working hard on trying to have a strategic vision for the place in the future, as well as dealing with all those incredibly difficult day-to-day, week-to-week problems which people are struggling with at the moment. Thank you, Ian.
Thank you, Andrew. Very thoughtful, thought-provoking insight into really the changes as you see them, and sort of the local restructuring of the local authorities. Certainly that sort of thought around, do we lose the ability to shape the future in Northampton as we move from a borough council into a unitary authority? And sort of, I'm sure that'll be on everybody's minds about the future in Northampton itself. I'm hoping to invite Andrea Ledson. Can I invite you to come back if you're still available, just to answer one or two questions, if I may? Thank you. Welcome back, Andrea. We've just got a couple of minutes just to answer a couple of questions that certainly have been very prevalent in people's minds over the last few months in particular, but have been certainly the height of the top of people's lists of concerns even before COVID. And one of that is really around business rates and property tax. And certainly the government has been talking around sort of the restructuring of that for quite some time. And there have been various reliefs given over the last few months to businesses for that. But how do you see the future, and can we attach any sort of timeline to looking at that, particularly given the prevalence of online shopping now and the challenges that businesses have with overheads? Andrea, can I ask you first for comment, please?
Andrea or Andrew?
Andrea, sorry.
Okay. Yes, I'm often mistaken for Andrew and vice versa. I don't think we look very alike. What do you think? Anyway, to turn to the serious point, online and offline are incredibly difficult areas, and certainly, you know, even under Philip Hammond as Chancellor, there were efforts made to look at how we can ensure fairness between online and on high street shopping, and that work is still underway. It's quite clear that the problem with digital taxes is that they will just simply go elsewhere unless it's a sort of global or at least a big regional imposition. And certainly the government, prior to COVID, when I was still in cabinet, so a year ago now, there were strong efforts being made to work with other like-minded countries, particularly the United States, to try and ensure a digital tax. And colleagues on the call will be aware that there is a very small tax, I think it might be 2.5%, as a toe in the water to see how that works. But there's no doubt, I mean, I hear from retailers who say that someone will walk into their shop, have a look at the goods on the shelf, and then stand there and buy it on Amazon. So, I mean, it is clear a real problem, and something for town centres that the government has its New Towns Fund and is really encouraging all members of Parliament to bid in on behalf of their towns to try and spruce them up, to make them more attractive, as you yourself said, Ian, to make them much more places for leisure where people will be tempted in, and then whilst they're there will buy from retailers. So there's no easy answers, but certainly it's something that government is very clearly grappling with.
Andrew, from your perspective, just touching on the sort of the ability for local decisions to have an influence on that sort of thing, do you think there's a prospect of property taxes being able to be influenced at a local level to sort of follow the needs of individual places?
Yes, I'd hope so. Although you know, it comes back to my earlier problem, identifying a problem of the sort of centralised mentality that we've had as a country for a very, very long time. And Andrea's right to identify all the problems about getting rid of business rates, even though there's obviously a lot of enthusiasm to do so, and a much stronger enthusiasm to do so now, given online. Because when it was simply the threat to historic town centres of out-of-town retail parks, that didn't sort of worry the Treasury as much, because that was simply putting a business rate and a business tax on another property somewhere else. So they're still bringing in the same amount of money. The reason the Treasury liked business rates is because obviously it's a tax on something that's physically there and therefore can't sort of disappear in the same way as digital taxes can. But if we are going to want a future that remains place-based, that allows for human interaction, that doesn't go entirely digital, and takes into account that the fact that people have costs having physical retail businesses in the way that digital doesn't, then more rebalancing is needed. And there are two balances there. There's the rebalance between the Treasury wanting to make sure it brings enough as much revenue in through an alternative tax, but there's also the challenge of creating a fair playing field between businesses that have a physical location and those that don't. And the incentive for us to sort of lean slightly towards the physical is that that's healthier for society and people's interactions at the same time as being good for retail.